Hi everyone, so I'm Theresa. I work as a technical support engineer as part of the customer success department in Crowdstrike. Crowdstrike is a cloud native endpoint security vendor. And I understand that a lot of you, or if not all of you, are high school students. And right now you're probably applying to colleges and trying to decide what you want to do, what you want to major in. And hopefully my journey and how I got to where I am now kind of gives you some value, and you can take that away and help you decide on what you want to do. So a little bit of background about me. I graduated from Westminster High School in 2016. I'm not sure if you guys know what school that is, but that's okay. So when I went to high school, there weren't that many tech-related courses or computer science courses when I went. So I didn't really have that much of an introduction to coding. My actual first introduction to coding was through this one class where we had to use Adobe Flash to animate some little animations, some little videos that just for fun. And through Adobe Flash, I used JavaScript to animate some shapes across the screen and have it morph and stuff like that. So that was when I decided, that's when I started to consider, maybe I want to go into computer science. And at the time, I did a little bit of research into the tech industry. I knew it was a fast-paced, growing industry that I wanted to partake in. That's when I decided that I wanted to major in computer science. So I then attended Cal Poly Pomona from 2016 to 2020, and I graduated with a BS in computer science. When I attended Cal Poly, the computer science courses were very informative, but it didn't really help in me deciding what I wanted to do, because tech is a really big field and there's a lot of niches, a lot of specializations, and a lot of different tools and frameworks. And it can get overwhelming when you first decide, when you try to figure out where your footing is and what you actually want to do in tech. And so actually in my senior year of college, so actually my senior summer into my senior year of college, I held an internship with Crowdstrike as a customer success intern. What I did with the internship is that I helped create internal tools for the customer success department. So one of the projects I did was I helped create an application that helped automate when the account managers would create business reports for their clients. I would just help automate the creation of those reports so that they don't have to manually type it up and do it all themselves. And another project that I had was that I helped automate the creation of training scenarios for new incoming technical support engineers as well. And after that internship, after I graduated Crowdstrike, they offered me a full-time job as a technical support engineer, where I am at right now. So I just want to explain a little bit more about what is Crowdstrike. As I introduced when I first introduced, Crowdstrike is a cybersecurity vendor, but it's way more, it's a very large product. So what Crowdstrike we have this Falcon platform, and it's built to stop breaches. But on this platform, there are many different modules, and all of this is created to provide a holistic security solution for organizations. And I'm going to touch on some characteristics that really set us apart from other cybersecurity vendors. So part of the Falcon platform is that we are a next generation antivirus solution. So in the past, we had something called legacy antivirus solutions. And what legacy AVs did was they relied on signatures to determine what are malicious files and what are not. And how they did that was they would take the hash values of certain files and they compare it to their database and see which one they listed as malicious and which one isn't. So it's a very static and linear way of determining what are threats and what aren't. As a next generation antivirus solution, instead of using signatures, we use a combination of artificial intelligence, behavior patterns, and exploit mitigation. So the thing with legacy AVs is that it only provides coverage for malicious files, but doesn't provide coverage for fileless attacks like exploits or like script-based attacks. So with NGAVs, we use a combination of AI and behavioral patterns, which provides more dynamic coverage and is able to detect against unknown threats. So instead of looking at the signatures, we look at the actual behavior that is being performed on the host itself. And on top of that, there's no need for scans. So I'm not sure if you guys have used this before, like for example, Windows Defender, you have to do scheduled scans and it'll tell you what files can be potentially malwares and what isn't. Whereas as an NGAV solution, we don't need scans because we have a sensor that is always active as long as the host is online. Okay. And other than an NGAV solution, we provide endpoint detection and response as well. So security operations centers, providing a means to detect threats and to prevent against those threats, it's really nice. But security operations, they require something more. They require visibility for their own investigations and remediation as well. So what we do is we provide massive amounts of analytics and we integrate that within our threat database to provide really well-rounded context into what is going on the host itself. So especially in security, time is everything. The longer an actor or a malware is on a host or in an environment, the more damage they would do. So providing a really well-detailed and well-rounded means of investigating through events, it allows these security operations centers to investigate and remediate these threats in a really timely manner. Okay. And here's an example of our user interface. You see there's a process tree and you see there's some detections, and it makes putting everything in the process tree makes everything much more easier to read, and it helps the security analysts find these threats faster. So another thing that really sets us apart is that we're a cloud-based security solution. Crowdstrike is actually one of the pioneers in cloud-based security, and it is a growing trend in cybersecurity vendors as well, where they're really moving towards hosting all the detection logic on the cloud. So what this means is that the actual software that we have that clients will install on the computer itself is a sensor, but the sensor will communicate to the cloud, which has all the detection logic stored in it. So that means that the actual software that they install on the host is really lightweight and it doesn't take up that much resources. And on top of that, because there's no need to scan, you don't need to set aside a time during the day apart to scan the entire machine, because then that would take up a lot of resources and slow down the machine. So that was with productivity as well. And because the detection logic is stored in the cloud, that means you can update it fast, and those updates will reach the sensor even faster than if it were to be a legacy antivirus solution. So with the threat landscape, malwares and threat actors are constantly getting smarter and they're constantly evolving. So we have a research team that has to prepare coverage for these kind of attacks. And so since the detection logic is stored in the cloud, we can update that detection logic really fast. So we provide near real-time protection for customers as well. Okay, so now that I kind of explained what Crowdstrike does, I'm going to go into what I do as a technical support engineer. So as a technical support engineer, I'm supposed to be an expert on the product. We support the product, and whenever it kind kind of breaks or whenever there's a technical issue, that's when we intervene. Because the Falcon platform is so extensive, we really have to be a jack of all trades. We have to know a little bit of everything and dip our toes in every single kind of department. And sorry. So when clients, they submit a case and there's a bug or there's an issue, that's when we will step in, we'll review the entire issue, and then we'll if needed, we escalate that to engineering and remain as a point of contact between the client, engineers, and the sales department as well. And as part of customer success, we ensure the product is healthy and it's utilized correctly by the customer as well. And as a technical support engineer, you really see how every single department moves as a whole, which is really interesting to me. Okay. And so I was thinking when I created this presentation, looking back when I was in high school and thinking what I hoped that I knew when I entered computer science, or what I knew, or what I asked myself if I want what I wanted to do in the future. So I know that a lot of people ask you, like, what do you want to do? And it's a really loaded question. It's a really difficult question to ask. It can get overwhelming. So I kind of wish someone had asked me instead, what kind of impact do you want to have? Since, like, for me, for example, I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do with computer science, but having that internship at Crowdstrike, it really helped expose me to cybersecurity and then many different positions in cybersecurity. For example, there's sales engineering, there's support, there's engineers, there's threat response as well. And while all of these, they may not require, like, they're not exactly like security analyst positions, I do consider them as cybersecurity jobs, because you do need to have some technical background to be able to work in these positions. And so instead of asking, like, what do you want to do, I would rather ask yourself, like, what kind of impact do you want to have, and then build those skills to align with those ideals instead. So sorry, that concludes my presentation. So sorry, that went by really fast.
Yeah, no, that's fine. We have some questions prepared for you.
Okay, perfect.
So I have one question.
Right, cool.
What can high schoolers interested in cybersecurity do now to prepare themselves for entering the field?
Yeah, so here's a good thing. Because you guys have the internet, there's a lot of online free resources. I recommend probably going on, for example, Coursera and Udemy. They have some free boot camps that you guys can do. It kind of gives you guys, like, just shows you the basics of cybersecurity and good practices that you want to do. But if you want to delve into something deeper, a little bit more technical, then the boot camps on Udemy, they're fairly cheap. They're like less than $20. I recommend those, and they give you a good structure in how to study different tools and different ways to learn cybersecurity. On top of that, there is, if you want to do like some like challenges, there's a website called RootMe. It is a little bit more advanced, but beginners, if you're really interested, you can take the time and learn it. So they provide these challenges for cybersecurity tools, and it helps you learn how to protect against web server attacks, like different kind of attacks, like network activity, and it teaches you how to prepare for those like exploits and how to patch those vulnerabilities against those kinds of attacks.
So a different question that came up was, you've talked a lot about the different technical elements of CrowdStrike that sets it apart from possible competitors. But do you think there are any other elements of the company, such as maybe work environment or et cetera, that you find appealing about the company?
Yeah, so fun fact, actually, Crowdstrike started out as a majority remote work from home company. So then when COVID happened, it was really easy for us to transition to remote work for everyone because that was already kind of like the norm in the company. So aside from that, it is one of the, I think it was like on the Forbes list or something where it was like one of the best companies to work at. And I do agree with that. Our managers are really supportive, they're really flexible, and they really take the time to listen to your concerns and help you grow in your position. And also Crowdstrike itself, how I first heard about Crowdstrike before my internship, I didn't have that much exposure to cybersecurity, but I did know that they're one of the leaders in cybersecurity industry. From the 2016 election, I don't know if you guys remember, but Crowdstrike actually helped investigate those DNC email hacks and found out where those attackers originated from. So that's why I knew that I wanted to join the company, even though I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do in the company itself. So just knowing that Crowdstrike, that they have a really large impact in the tech industry, and not just the tech industry itself, also in the healthcare industry, in the like hotel management. Like you don't think about it, but hotels are actually one of the hardest hit by like threat actors and malicious actors. So just knowing that I'm part of a company that has a really large impact and that they're really receptive and want to see me grow is something that is really supportive.
Thank you. So a question that came in from Ms. Jacqueline Zhou, she asked, what are some of the companies or different users that CrowdStrike works with?
So I can't, that's confidential. I don't really provide customers like, I'm trying to find like the line where I can like what I can say, what I can't. So we work with a lot of different customers, a lot of different industries, healthcare industries, because they do need IT security. Not just that, mobile app companies, hotels, and also government agencies as well. I can't list them exactly because that is a breach of their contract. But basically every industry you can think of that utilizes anything that has to do with online data or anything that has customer data on it, we provide a service to them. Because cybersecurity is something that I really think that every industry needs, especially since everything is going online and going into clouds now, instead of just being in stored on file. It is something that is really important and that every industry does need.
Okay, so a question from Nathan Song. He asks, you talked a bit about how CrowdStrike installs a sensor that sends information over the cloud instead of a full scanning software. He asks, are there any disadvantages or security threats that come with that technology?
I don't believe so. I think that's a huge improvement than what we had before, than having this full scanning software. So the sensor, because it's really fast to update and really fast to install. Whereas when you had that legacy AV software, it takes up a lot of resources and it takes a long time to install. And the thing is that because malwares are always evolving, we always see different variants of malwares. That full scanning software before that we had, it's really slow to update. And in security, time is everything. You want to have the best protection as soon as possible. So with the sensor to cloud architecture that we have, it's really fast to update our cloud, and that cloud update will reach the sensor really quickly as well. So if anything, I see it as a huge improvement. I don't see anything really, any pitfalls or downfalls to it. And that is kind of like the structure that most cybersecurity vendors are moving towards now, where they have sensitive cloud communications and having that structure instead of having actual just like the full scanning software itself.
Okay, thank you. So we have a question from Gabriel. He asks, it is a like an uncertain time, but do you have any plans for the future in terms of career or where you want to go next?
So I know I said I was a technical support engineer, and you do have to like kind of know a little bit of everything. But as a support engineer, I am able to have some specializations right now. Since technically I am only, it's a little bit less than a year since I started my full time. So I haven't really picked my specialization yet, but right now I'm going down the path of detections, helping investigate detections and explaining why something triggered, or if we do miss a detection, being able to grab that data and provide it to engineering or the templates team to provide a pattern and sensor coverage for that. So in terms of like future, what I want to do in the future, it's something that I do want to go down that route and learn more about threat hunting and responding to these threats. So that's a pretty open-ended question. I think that's a good question.
All right, so we have another question. Lydia asks, what are some common misconceptions that people have about like the cybersecurity field or your company or etc.?
Yeah, so cybersecurity, I'm sure you've seen those movies before where you see a hacker and they're just typing fiercely on their keyboard, and you see like lines of code like running through like bajillion miles per second on their screen. That's definitely not how hackers work at all. If anything, it's mostly through social engineering. So what social engineering is that it's when an attacker, they target specific people. Like for example, if you're part of a specific company, they'll disguise an email to look like someone else from that company. Like for example, if you work at a hospital, they'll send you an email with an email handle from that hospital itself. So they think that you're a coworker that you've never met before, and they'll say something like, "Oh, you need to click on this link. There's a problem with your computer, whatever." And when they click on the link, it downloads like a malicious payload. That's how actors can get into people's computers, basically, and retrieve data. So it's not as fast paced or not as like crazy as it seems in the movies, for sure. But the thing is, it is very all these attacks, they are very specific and in what they target and how they execute. So that's why it's really important to keep up with all these different malwares and different actors and different trends in malwares as well, so that we can create patterns, and so that our machine learning engine can detect these threats before they actually execute on the host or before they even actually become known to us.
So someone in the chat asked you to elaborate on maybe the different types of malware that are common and the recognition process for those types of malware.
Yeah, sure. So for example, ransomware. So then how ransomware, what happens is that what ransomware is that it's a malicious software that when it's executed on the host, it'll find sensitive data, sensitive files, and then they'll encrypt it, and then they'll send a message to the user and say like, oh, we've encrypted this file, pay us this amount of money, and then we'll release it. And if you don't, we'll expose it to the public. So for example, one of the signs that we find, or one of the behaviors that we look for in ransomware is that we look for known extensions that ransomware uses to encrypt the files. Like, trying to find a good example. for example, we know that like .air, we've seen ransomware use that as an extension to encrypt files before. So we take that into account when we create our patterns, and our machine learning engine takes that into account when it looks at all the processes that is executed on the host. On top of that, we look for anything that traverses a lot of directories at once. If it does, then that is just inherently a suspicious process. And then another thing we look for with ransomware is that if that process touches a lot of data sensitive files. So with all of that three things combined, there's more aspects to it. There's a lot of little specific things to it, but I can't discuss it because it is proprietary information. But we look at everything the process does at once, and that's how we determine, for example, if something is ransomware. Yeah, or like, for example, if there's a vulnerability that Microsoft says that, oh, this needs to be patched, and they're working on a patch, but it's not up, they don't have a security update yet. We will look at different ways that attackers can exploit that vulnerability, and we will take that into account when we create behavior patterns. So that's, I don't know if that was specific enough.
No, I like that answer.
From Natalie, she asked, like, what is your favorite part of your job from your experience so far?
Well, definitely my favorite job is you're always learning something new, which I know some people, it's not something they like, but I like to always be on my feet and on my toes when I'm working. So for example, like, because I am starting to specialize in detections, I'm always seeing new detections and how to investigate them, and how different malware and different exploits kind of evolve over time. I think that's always something that's really interesting, because you can read about these in like articles and stuff, but seeing it actually happen in front of you is a really different story. On top of that, my coworkers are really great. My managers are really great. They're really fun. So I think work environment is also really important when you decide like where you want to stay, or what career you want to do, because yeah, like, if this job, like, I could love this job, but if my managers and the work environment was really unhealthy, then it's not healthy for me to stay. So there's that as well. Also, with Crowdstrike, we're always evolving as well. For example, we first started out as an endpoint protection platform, and now we're going to cloud security and cloud workloads. That's a totally different story as well that we're trying to encompass. And just as the platform evolves and I'm learning new stuff, I think that's also a really interesting thing to do as well.
So a question from the chat is, from a security standpoint, do hackers and scammers work in a similar way? And are you able to prevent the actions of both, like, at the same time?
So, sorry, can you repeat that question? I'm trying to
So
process.
he's asking, from like a security standpoint, do hackers and scammers work in similar ways? And how the going about of preventing the actions of those people, like the differences or similarities?
Okay, so we do see trends in how hackers try to attack an environment, and that is one of our exploit mitigation capabilities that we provide. So I'm trying to think of how to explain this. So then we do see like, oh, if something does look suspicious, we have certain like exploit patterns that we look at. And if a process does look suspicious, we will prevent that. If we see a for example, a file that is performing in a suspicious way, if it's even like a PowerShell process or like a Unix command that looks suspicious or looks to be part of something that is suspicious, prevent that. So that's the thing with the sensor that is really beneficial in comparison to the legacy AV, is that the sensor, since it is fast to update, it is also fast to monitor all these processes, and it can prevent right before that these suspicious processes can execute. Whereas with the legacy AVs, you have to scan the computer, and that's when you can see which files are malicious or not. So with the sensor, it's always online, it's always working, and it's always detecting and preventing.
So a different question from Eunice is, because of the pandemic and COVID-19, has that affected like the severity of cybersecurity threats? Has that affected anything at all?
Oh yeah, for sure. So that's another thing with social engineering, is that it takes advantage of what's happening in our current society. So with COVID, there's a huge uprise in COVID-19 phishing scams, for example. So what, like, for example, what victims will see is that they'll see an email from their coworker or something about COVID. And when they open it, it doesn't even have to be a script that they download. When they open the email, it'll run a script itself, and because it will disguise itself as, for example, like a productivity app like Excel, and it'll run the script from Excel. That's another thing that we look for, is productivity apps if it's running scripts. So yeah, no, definitely with COVID-19, we do see an uptick in kind of like phishing scams or attacks catered towards COVID concerns.
So a question from Jacqueline is that, when you were talking about the new kind of like the more advanced technology that Crowdstrike is using compared to the more traditional versions, she asked if you can elaborate on the use of machine learning and AI in those technologies.
Yeah, so I can't go too in depth about what it is, but I'll give a general overview. So we use machine learning. So our machine learning engine is built from really complicated statistical and mathematical models. And the thing with machine learning that is really beneficial in comparison to just us doing active threat hunting is that it can process like thousands of suspicious characteristics at once, and it can cross-examine all those characteristics to determine if something is malicious or if it reaches a certain threshold of suspiciousness or not. So that's something that is really beneficial to have, because it can actually detect malwares before we even know they are malwares. So, and on top of that, because we feed it this data, it can train itself. It's constantly retraining itself, and it's learning to detect new forms and new variants of malwares and suspicious processes. So that's kind of a general overview of our machine learning engine. I can't go into in depth and like how it's built or what it exactly does, but yeah, that's why it's super beneficial to have NGAVs. Again, you're putting your organization ahead of the curve in terms of security, because it is able to find these potentially malicious files and trigger detection for you to review them. And that's how we really find new malwares. That's how we discover new malwares and new forms of attacks as well.
So we have a more like non-work related question that came in. They're asking, what are some other hobbies or passions you have outside of maybe computer science or cybersecurity?
Okay, so just like general hobbies, right?
Yeah.
Okay, because I guess trying to think. Okay, well, I mean, I obviously I enjoy watching like Netflix. I feel like that's something that everyone does. They enjoy watching TV shows and Netflix. I wasn't really into gaming before, but recently I got into like this new game called Genshin Impact that I do play a bit too often. um, what else? With COVID, it's kind of hard to kind of go out and stuff, but before I used to go hiking a lot. So yeah, no, it is definitely possible to have a life outside of computer science if you go into that. If that's the question, if that's what the question is trying to get at. It's like, but at the same time, I still do keep up with different technologies and frameworks as well. I think that's really important if you want to go into tech, because the tech landscape is always evolving. You're always seeing new frameworks or new languages become more popular. And the thing is that like it's really impossible to keep up with it all at once. So as long as you know like the foundation of programming or the foundations of how to use these different frameworks, that would be enough. As long as you are able to learn these new things, that's what's more important than actually like becoming expert on these different tools.
So we have a question in the chat from Talant. Sorry if I mispronounced that. They ask, when you mentioned that going into the STEM field, specifically computer science, there was kind of an overwhelming feeling because there were so many options that you could decide on, like specializing in. So they're wondering, did you have to go through like trial and error processes with like maybe different courses or jobs to decide on this, or was it more easier?
No, yeah, definitely I had to do trial and error. Because at first like I said, at first my first introduction to programming was through animating different shapes across the screen through Adobe Flash using JavaScript. So I thought that, at the time I wasn't sure. I knew that there was like a mobile app development and web development, but when I first chose to go into computer science, I wanted to actually go into like graphics. And then I took a graphics class, and then I learned that's not what I wanted to do. It's super intensive, and it's very very specific, because since you're animating across the screen, you have to know exactly what you're going to do and how it's going to be displayed. So definitely like doing clubs and being active in clubs in college and taking different elective courses, it kind of helped me decide what I want to do, because it kind of gave me it was a way for me to dip my toe in different fields. So first I wanted to go into like computer graphics, and I was like, oh, maybe not a good idea for me. And I decided, oh, maybe I want to go into mobile app development, because in mobile app development, it is a little bit different than web app development, because they use different frameworks, different languages. And then I was like, okay, maybe I could do this. But then it wasn't until I got that internship at Crowdstrike, because before I wasn't really interested in cybersecurity. But when I got that internship, and like I said, I decided to join them because I knew they were a very reputable company that had a large impact as well. That's my exposure to cybersecurity, and that's how I decided that I wanted to enter the cybersecurity field. So it's really, I say like when you enter college, or even like as a high school student, try to expose yourself to different like specializations as much as possible, even if it's just like reading up on a topic or like doing introductory courses. I think it'll give you a head start for sure.
So regarding your internship, someone in the chat is asking, what was your process or experience like in getting that internship and how that was?
Yeah, okay, so I found the internship application listing through LinkedIn. I'm pretty sure you guys know what LinkedIn is. Basically, it's a social network for for hiring professionals. So I found the application process through LinkedIn. And so usually with these internships, what will happen is that there'll be a recruiter that will kind of guide you through the whole process and let you know what's going to happen, how the interview process is going to be laid out, and just really help you out where you have questions, because they do know that as college students or as high school students, it's probably one of like your first interviews that you're going through. So I got my first interview. I went through 3 rounds of interviews. Each one was really awesome. My first one was with my manager, and the second one was with the associates on the team, and the last one was with the actual vice president of the department itself. And throughout it all, it was pretty pretty smooth. With the whole interview process is pretty smooth. So is there anything else specific that you want to know about the interview process?
The person who asked, if they clarify or ask more specific, I can relay that to you when that happens.
From my point of view, I'm really curious about these interviews. What do you think was the most important part about like your responses to a CrowdStrike interview? Like, how did you sell yourself in the interview? If you're okay with me asking.
Yeah, of course. That's a really good question. So also, if you're gonna go into anything like software engineer or like solutions architecture, anything that involves really like hardcore programming, you will need that technical foundation where you need to know data structures and algorithms. On top of that, other than that, like in terms of like behavioral things, that is a good indicator for CrowdStrike hires is how willing you are to learn, and how enthusiastic you are about the product and about joining the team. Because the thing is, as like hiring like interviewees, they can tell if you're just there to like get a paycheck or just there to put this on your application. What they want to know is whether you're actually passionate about the company, passionate about what the company does. Is a really good sign. And if you're curious, because the thing is, CrowdStrike, I don't expect a lot of people to know what it is or what exactly it does. But as long as you're willing to learn and you want to know more about what the company does, then that's a really good sign for the interviewer.
So the original asker clarified, are there anything that you did to prepare yourself for that interviews?
Oh, yeah. So in my first interview, it's more like a kind of like a briefing. They kind of briefed me on what the position is. And that was when I was able to decide what to prepare myself in. For example, I prepare myself with because one of my main points was that I was a computer science major and I didn't know how to program. So I was able to develop these internal tools for the team. So I really want to showcase my my data structure skills. And so that's something that I prepared myself and I studied for. That's something that you can ask, and that's a good idea to ask in interviews is if there's any specific technologies that the position is looking for, that the position will use often. That's a good idea to ask, and then you can then study up on those technologies and prepare for the future interviews that way.
So because the time is reaching near the end, we're gonna do maybe 1 or 2 more questions before we start to wrap up the session. So Gabriel asked, for the general population, what are some ways that we can be more aware and protect ourselves against the cyber threats that are going on right now?
Yeah, of course. So I know I like I kind of like I kind of use Defender as a bad example of a cybersecurity solution, but no, Defender is very capable if you're just an everyday user. Definitely you want to be aware of the websites you go on, or like what files you download, what emails you open. If something looks weird or something looks suspicious, don't open it. And basically, you want to be aware of the online footprint you have, the data you supply to different websites. I know, like, for example, there are cookies that kind of like cache your information. Those are fine as long as they're on reputable websites. But if you want to be extra careful, it is a good idea to clear those cookies and clear the cache. Yeah, other than that, I don't. Oh, and also use a good Wi-Fi connection. Try to stay away from public Wi-Fi connections. So those are pretty good practices as an everyday user.
Thank you so much for your time, Theresa. And once again, like, if you give her thanks, maybe in the chat, maybe do some clapping, because she spent a lot of her time answering our questions. So thank you so much for doing this.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.